Elder felt the first crack appear in his crystalline arm as the morning star rose over Or. The pain shot through his body like lightning, but it was not the worst part. The worst part was knowing what it meant. His people were dying. They had lived on this world for over 50,000 years. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could channel the energy from stars. For countless generations, they had used this gift to build the great beacon network that helped ships navigate across the galaxy. Every major trade route depended on their navigation signals. Every spacefaring race knew them as the silent guardians who kept the star lanes safe. But now their star was dying. Walked slowly through the crystal gardens where his people lived. The beautiful towers that had once sung with harmonic energy now produced only broken notes. Younger sat in small groups, their bodies showing the same stress fractures that marked his own form. The radiation from their changing star was too strong. Their biological filters could no longer protect them. El, his oldest friend, approached with news that made his heart sink even deeper. The southern colonies report complete evacuation, El said, his voice ringing like distant bells. The radiation there has become lethal. We estimate 300 solar cycles before the same happens here. 300 cycles. In human terms, that was roughly one Earth year. Looked up at the swirling energy storms that now danced around their star, beautiful and deadly. His people had evolved to live with stellar radiation, but this was beyond anything they could survive. The star's core was collapsing, creating new forms of energy that turned their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. "How many ships do we have?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 43 vessels capable of interstellar travel, El replied. They can carry perhaps 2,000 of our people. We number over 4 million. Nodded slowly. They had never been builders of great fleets. They were gardeners, engineers, and navigators. Their ships were designed for maintenance work on the beacon network, not mass evacuation. "Then we must ask for help," he said. The decision was not easy. They had always been proud of their independence. They provided services to other species but rarely asked for anything in return. To beg for rescue would go against everything their culture valued. But watching young suffer as their bodies slowly cracked and failed, new pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. He made his way to the central communication hub, where the most powerful quantum transmitters on the planet waited. The other elders had already gathered. Their expressions were grim but determined. They all understood what needed to be done. Placed his crystalline hands on the transmission controls. The device hummed to life, channeling energy through his body and out into space. He felt the familiar sensation of his consciousness expanding, reaching across the vast distances between stars. "People of the galaxy," he began, his words carried by quantum waves to every major civilization. "This is Elder of the Navigation Council. We who have guided your ships through the dark spaces between stars now call for aid ourselves." He paused, feeling the weight of the moment. This message would reach the Galactic Council on distant Prime. It would be heard by the proud Ani Empire, masters of 1,000 worlds. The hegemony's war fleets would receive it. Even the mysterious Etherians, who rarely spoke to other species, would know of their plight. "Our star dies, and with it, our people. We seek evacuation assistance for 4 million souls. Our biology makes us difficult passengers for most vessels, but we hope that among the great civilizations of the galaxy, someone will find a way to help us survive." The transmission continued for nearly an hour, explained their situation in detail. He described how their crystalline bodies conducted electricity in ways that could damage most ship systems. He admitted that they had no great treasures to offer in exchange, no advanced weapons or secret technologies. They were simply a dying people who needed help. When the transmission ended, there was nothing to do but wait. The responses began arriving within days. The Galactic Council sent a formal acknowledgement of their distress call, A committee would be formed to study the situation. Experts would review the technical challenges. A full report would be issued in 6 months. 6 months, half of their remaining time. The Ani Empire responded next. Their message was polite and full of sympathy. They praised this long service to galactic navigation. As a gesture of respect, they offered to preserve digital copies of cultural archives for future generations. They would build a monument to honor their memory. The hegemony's reply was shorter but equally disappointing. They explained that their military vessels were not designed for civilian evacuation. However, they promised to patrol the system after the evacuation was complete to prevent looting of the abandoned beacon stations. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy found reasons why they could not help. The technical challenges were too great. The electromagnetic interference from physiology would damage their ships. The distance was too far. The cost was too high. Some offered to take small numbers of perhaps a few hundred scientists or cultural leaders. But when asked about the rest of his people, the answers were always the same. Unfortunate necessity, unavoidable sacrifice, the greater good. 2 months passed. Young began dying as the radiation grew stronger. The crystal cities that had stood for started to crack and crumble. Emergency evacuations moved people away from the most affected areas, but there were fewer and fewer safe places to go. Stood in his private chambers, looking out at the energy storms that now raged constantly around their star. His own body showed deep fractures that glowed with unstable light. He had perhaps 1 more month before the radiation would claim him too. El entered without announcement, something he had never done before. "Elder," he said, his voice carrying strange harmonics of excitement, "we have received another response." Turned, expecting to hear yet another polite refusal. Instead, El was practically singing with hope. "Who asked?" "Humans," El replied. "A species I have never heard of. They say they are coming to help." Accessed the galactic databases through his neural interface. Humans were indeed listed, but barely. A young species that had only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. They controlled perhaps a dozen star systems. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. What can they possibly do that the great empires cannot? He wondered aloud. El transmitted the human message directly to his consciousness. It was short and simple, transmitted in basic galactic common. "People, this is Captain Maria Santos of the human vessel Resilience. We received your distress call. We are changing course to reach you. Hold on. We're coming to help." That was all. No mention of committees or studies. No discussion of technical difficulties. No request for payment or political favors. Just a simple promise that help was coming. For the first time in months, Elder allowed himself to hope. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching the stars stream past as her ship traveled at maximum warp toward the outer rim territories. They were 3 days into what should have been a routine survey mission when the distress call changed everything. The message had come through their quantum receiver during the night shift. Officer had woken the captain immediately, knowing that interstellar distress calls were rare and always serious. Now, 12 hours later, Santos found herself facing the most difficult decision of her career. "Play it again," she said to her communications officer. The bridge speakers filled with the melodic but desperate voice of Elder. Even translated through their computer systems, the pain and hope in the alien's words was clear. 4 million people were going to die, and nobody seemed willing or able to help them. "Any word from command about our new orders?" Santos asked. Lieutenant Commander, her first officer, shook his head. "Still waiting for a response. But you know what they'll say, Captain. We're not a rescue vessel. Our mission parameters don't include major evacuation operations." Santos nodded grimly. The Resilience was an exploration ship, designed for mapping new star systems and conducting scientific surveys. Her crew of 85 was already pushing their supply limits for a 6-month mission. Taking on even a few dozen refugees would strain their resources to the breaking point. "What do we know about these?" she asked. Dr. Sarah, the ship's chief science officer, consulted her data pad. "Fascinating species, actually. They're silicon-based life forms with crystalline bodies that can process stellar radiation. They've been maintaining the Galactic Navigation Network for thousands of years. Without their beacon stations, interstellar trade would be nearly impossible." "And their physiology?" Santos asked. Doctor's expression grew troubled. "That's the problem. Their bodies naturally generate electromagnetic fields and conduct electrical energy. Most modern ships can't handle that kind of interference. Their presence would likely cause massive system failures on vessels with standard shielding." Chief Engineer Torres looked up from her station. "Actually, Captain, I've been thinking about that. Our systems might be different." Santos raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Torres stood and moved to the main display screen. "Most galactic species use integrated computer networks with quantum processors and energy-based data transfer. We humans still use a lot of fiber optic cables and isolated circuit systems. It's why other species think our tech is primitive." "You're saying our primitive technology might actually be an advantage?" asked with a slight smile. "Exactly," Torres replied. "Fiber optics don't conduct electricity the same way. Our main computer systems are physically separated from our power grid. We might be able to handle passengers that would fry a Ani ship's electronics." Santos felt a spark of hope, but she forced herself to think practically. "Even if we could transport them safely, how many could we take? A few hundred at most." "The distress call mentioned 4 million people," Doctor said quietly. "Even if we stripped out half our equipment and crammed people into every available space, we couldn't save more than a tiny fraction of them." The bridge fell silent. Santos stared at the star chart showing their current position and the location of the or system. It was a significant detour from their planned route, and even if they went there immediately, they could do very little good. "Captain," Lieutenant spoke up from the communication station, "I've been monitoring galactic channels. The major powers are all sending their regrets to the Galactic Council is forming a study committee. The Ani are offering to build a memorial. Nobody is actually going to help with the evacuation." Frowned, 4 million people, and nobody is even trying. "The technical challenges are significant," Doctor admitted, "and the logistics of evacuating an entire population across interstellar distances. It would require a massive fleet and months of coordination." Santos walked to the forward, looking out at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was dying while the galaxy's great powers debated and made excuses. She thought about her own family back on Earth, her daughter who was just starting university. What if it was humanity facing extinction? What if Earth's sun was dying and nobody would help? "Torres," she said suddenly, "how long would it take us to reach the or system if we changed course now?" 18 days at maximum warp, Torres replied. "But Captain, we don't have authorization to." "I didn't ask about authorization," Santos cut her off. "I asked how long." The crew exchanged glances. They had been together for 3 years, and they all recognized the tone in their captain's voice. Stepped closer to Santos. "Maria, I understand what you're thinking, but we need to be realistic. Even if we could safely transport passengers, we don't have the supplies for an extended rescue mission. We're already carrying 6 months of food for our current crew. Add even a few dozen aliens with different dietary needs, and we'll run out of everything." Santos turned to face her officers. "What if we didn't worry about regulations or supply limits? What if we just focused on doing whatever we could to help?" Doctor shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, the Prime Directive specifically states that we should not interfere in situations beyond our capabilities. This seems like exactly the kind of scenario where we should wait for proper authorization and resources. The Prime Directive also says we should render aid to those in distress, Santos countered. And right now, we're the only ship in the galaxy that's even considering helping these people. Lieutenant raised his hand tentatively. Captain, I've been running some calculations. If we stripped our cargo bays down to minimum equipment and converted them for passenger use, we could potentially take on maybe 800 individuals, assuming we could solve the electromagnetic interference problem. 800 out of 4 million. It was a tiny fraction, but Santos found herself thinking about her grandmother's stories of the old refugee ships that had brought families to safety during Earth's darker periods. Every person saved mattered. What about supplies? She asked. Torres consulted her engineering reports. If we went to emergency rations and reduced life support to minimum safe levels, we could stretch our resources for maybe 4 months. That's assuming we could find a suitable relocation site for the refugees within that. Looked around the bridge. This is insane. We're talking about completely abandoning our mission, possibly violating direct orders and putting our own crew at risk for a rescue operation that might not even work. Santos nodded slowly. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. She moved to the captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. Report to your department heads for an emergency crew meeting in 30 minutes. We need to discuss a significant change to our mission. After closing the channel, Santos looked around at her senior officers. I want everyone to understand that this is voluntary. If we do this, we're going beyond our orders and into uncharted territory in more ways than one. Anyone who wants to object or transfer off the ship when we reach the nearest station will be free to do so. Doctor was the first to speak. Captain, if we're really going to attempt this, I'll need to run extensive biological compatibility studies. We don't even know if can survive in our atmosphere. Torres nodded. And I'll need to start designing passenger modifications for our cargo bays. This is going to require some creative engineering. Crossed his arms but smiled slightly. I suppose someone needs to figure out the logistics of feeding 800 crystalline aliens for 4 months. Santos felt a warm surge of pride in her crew. Send a message to tell them help is coming. What should I say exactly? Asked. Santos thought for a moment, then said, keep it simple. Tell them we're the human ship Resilience and we're changing course to reach them. Tell them to hold on. As began composing the message, Torres asked, Captain, what about command? They're going to order us to return to our original mission. Santos smiled grimly. Then I suppose we'd better make sure our communications system has some technical difficulties for a while. The bridge crew looked at each other, understanding passing between them. They were about to embark on something that could end all of their careers. But sometimes, Santos reflected, doing the right thing was worth any consequences. Helm, set course for the Or system, she ordered. Maximum warp. As the Resilience changed direction and accelerated toward a dying star system, Santos wondered if they were making a terrible mistake or taking the first step toward something extraordinary. Either way, there was no turning back now. In the depths of space, a small human ship raced toward a doomed world, carrying nothing but determination and the hope that sometimes being willing to try was enough. The Resilience dropped out of warp at the edge of the Or system, and Captain Santos immediately understood why other species had considered the rescue impossible. The star at the system's heart was no longer the stable yellow sun that had nurtured the four. Instead, it writhed with unstable energy, sending out waves of radiation that made their ship's sensors scream warnings. Solar storms large enough to swallow planets danced across its surface, and the space around it crackled with electromagnetic disturbances. "My God," whispered Doctor from her science station, The radiation levels are off the charts. Captain Santos studied the main as they approached the third planet. What she saw took her breath away, or was a world of crystal, its surface covered in towering spires that caught and reflected the dying star's violent light. Even from orbit, she could see that many of the structures were damaged, their surfaces cracked and darkened. "Life signs?" she asked. "Difficult to read through all this interference," Lieutenant reported. "But I'm detecting approximately 3.8 million still on the surface, concentrated in the polar regions, probably seeking shelter from the worst radiation." Tors looked up from her engineering console, her face grim. "Captain, our shields are already taking a beating just from being in this system. I don't know how those people have survived this long." Elder's voice came through their communications system, distorted by the electromagnetic storms but still understandable. "Human vessel resilience, this is Elder. We are honored by your arrival, though we fear you may have come too late." Santos moved to the communications station. "Elder, this is Captain Santos. We're here to get you out. How much time do we have?" "The radiation reaches lethal levels for my people in approximately 60 of your Earth days," came the reply. "But Captain, your ship appears small. How many of us can you possibly save?" Santos looked around her bridge, seeing the same question in her crew's eyes. The honest answer was that they couldn't save everyone, but she had learned long ago that sometimes you had to start with what was possible and let that lead you to what seemed impossible. "Elder, we're going to save as many as we can, but first, we need to understand how to work with your people safely. Can you meet with us?" 3 hours later, Santos found herself in the Resilience's main cargo bay, which Tors had hastily converted into a meeting space. When the transport arrived, Santos wasn't sure what to expect. Elder was unlike any alien she had ever imagined. Nearly 3 meters tall, his body was composed of translucent crystal that seemed to contain swirling patterns of light. When he moved, musical tones filled the air, and Santos realized that they communicated as much through sound as through words. "Captain Santos," he said, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "you honor us with your presence. Though I confess, I do not understand why your people would risk yourselves for strangers." Santos smiled. "Where I come from, we have a saying, no one gets left behind. We heard you calling for help, so here we are." Doctor stepped forward with her medical scanners. "Elder, we need to understand how your physiology might affect our ship. Our sensors show that you generate significant electromagnetic fields." "Indeed," replied, and Santos noticed that several of her handheld devices were flickering. "This is why the great powers of the galaxy cannot help us. Our presence disrupts their advanced systems." Tors had been running diagnostics on her engineering pad. She looked up with surprise. "Actually, Elder, our systems seem to be handling your presence just fine. Our main computers are isolated from power fluctuations, and we use fiber optic networks that aren't affected by electromagnetic interference." Crystalline form brightened noticeably. "Your technology is unusual." "Most species think it's primitive," Tors admitted, "but sometimes simple is better." Over the next several hours, the teams worked together to understand the challenges they faced. This biology was indeed problematic for most ships, but the Resilience's supposedly outdated systems handled them remarkably well. The bigger problem was scale. "We estimate we can safely transport about 800 of your people," Santos explained. "I know that's a tiny fraction of your population, but—" "Captain," interrupted gently, "even saving 800 would be a miracle we had not dared hope for." But Santos was already thinking bigger. As they talked, she had been studying the ships in orbit. They were designed for short-range beacon maintenance, not interstellar travel, but they were. "Elder, what if we didn't just use our ship? What if we could modify your vessels for long-range travel?" Tors caught on immediately. "We could strip out our extra equipment and install it on ships, upgrade their life support and navigation systems. Doctor was shaking her head. That would take weeks we don't have, and even if it worked, where would we take them? They can't survive on most worlds. Harmonics took on a different tone, one that Santos somehow recognized as hope mixed with fear of disappointment. There are legends among my people of a world in the rim, rich in the crystals that sustain us, but it is in disputed space, claimed by the Empire, even if we could reach it. Let us worry about the politics later, Santos said firmly. First, let's focus on getting your people off this world. What followed were the most intense 2 weeks of Santos's career. Her crew worked around the clock, stripping equipment from the Resilience and installing it on vessels. Tours performed engineering miracles, creating hybrid systems that combined human reliability with energy efficiency. The humans quickly learned that working with them was unlike anything they had experienced. The aliens communicated through harmonic resonance as much as words, and Doctor discovered that humans could learn to understand their songs with surprising ease. Young gathered around the human work teams, fascinated by beings who used tools with their hands instead of channeling energy directly. In return, they shared their understanding of stellar engineering and energy manipulation. But the star's condition was worsening rapidly. Solar flares now erupted daily, sending deadly radiation across the planet's surface. The crystal cities were failing one by one as their inhabitants evacuated to underground shelters. "We need to move faster," Santos told her exhausted crew during one brief rest period. "At this rate, we'll only have half the ships ready before the radiation becomes lethal." It was who provided the solution. "Captain, what if we do not convert all ships completely? What if we prepare them for one journey only?" Tours understood immediately. Emergency modifications. Strip everything non-essential, minimal life support, just enough to reach a safe system. Doctor looked worried. "That's incredibly dangerous. One system failure and everyone aboard dies." Elder Santos asked, "Would your people accept that risk?" Response came as a harmony that needed no translation. Every in the room joined their voice to his, creating a sound of unanimous agreement that resonated through the ship's hull. The race against time intensified. Human and teams worked together, learning each other's languages and methods. Santos watched her crew push themselves beyond their limits, sharing their food with hungry alien workers and sleeping in shifts to maximize work time. When Young began falling ill from radiation exposure, Doctor and her team worked with healers to develop treatments. When human equipment failed under the electromagnetic stress, engineers showed them how to shield circuits with crystal formations. With only 10 days remaining before lethal radiation levels, they achieved something unprecedented. Instead of one rescue ship, they had created a small fleet of hybrid vessels capable of evacuating nearly 50,000. It still wasn't everyone. More than 3 million would have to stay behind. But as Santos looked at the converted ships preparing for departure, she felt proud of what they had accomplished. Elder approached her as the final preparations were made. "Captain Santos, my people have no words in any language for what you have done. We called out to the galaxy, and only humans answered." Santos looked around at her crew, who were working alongside to load the last of the evacuees. "We couldn't save everyone, Elder. I'm sorry." "You saved 50,000 souls who would have died forgotten," replied. "And more than that, you showed the galaxy that impossible things become possible when someone cares enough to try." As the small fleet prepared to depart the dying system, Santos realized that this was only the beginning. Now they had to find these people a home, and that might prove even more challenging than the rescue itself. But looking at her crew and their new allies working together, she felt confident they would find a way. After all, they had already done the impossible once. The convoy of hybrid ships traveled through space like a strange caravan of hope and desperation. 50,000 refugees crowded into vessels that had been hastily modified for their one-way journey to an uncertain future. The Resilience led the fleet, its crew working around the clock to keep everyone alive as they searched for a new home. Captain Santos stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display showing their small fleet. 12 ships, each packed far beyond safe capacity, following her vessel toward the rim. They had been traveling for 6 weeks, and the strain was showing on everyone. "Captain," Doctor reported from her station, "we're getting reports of life support failures on 3 more ships. They are having trouble maintaining the human equipment we installed." Santos nodded grimly. This had become a daily crisis. The hastily modified ships were breaking down regularly, and her crew was stretched thin trying to keep everyone alive. "Send repair teams to ships 4, 7, and 11. What's our supply status?" "Food stores at 40%, Lieutenant replied. "But that's assuming normal consumption. They eat much less than we estimated, which is helping." "What about water recycling?" Torres looked up from her engineering station. The crystal formations that they use actually help purify water. We're actually running more efficiently than projected on that front. Small miracles, Santos thought. They would need all of them to reach their destination. Elder had shared the ancient coordinates for the world they sought, a planet they called, in their harmonic language. According to their legends, it was rich in the specific crystal formations that could sustain their people. But the planet lay deep in space claimed by the Empire, a militaristic species known for their aggressive expansion policies. "Any word from our diplomatic messages to the?" Santos asked. "Still no response," replied, "though we have detected increased patrol activity in the region we're heading toward." Santos wasn't surprised. The Empire wasn't known for welcoming refugees, especially when those refugees were being escorted by humans. Humanity was still considered a minor power by galactic standards, barely worth this attention under normal circumstances. "Captain," Doctor said suddenly, "you need to see this." She transferred her display to the main screen, showing the interior of one of the ships. Santos expected to see crowded conditions and stressed refugees, but instead she saw something remarkable. Human crew members were sitting among groups of, learning to create the harmonic patterns that served as their language. In return, young were practicing human words, their crystal voices creating hauntingly beautiful versions of English phrases. "This is happening throughout the fleet," Doctor explained. "The 2 species are forming bonds at an unprecedented rate." Santos smiled despite their circumstances. Over the past weeks, she had watched these relationships develop. Humans had an unusual sensitivity to harmonics, while they found human emotional expressions fascinating. Cultural exchange was happening naturally in the cramped quarters of their makeshift refugee fleet. "Captain to the medical bay," came Doctor's voice over the intercom an hour later. "Emergency medical situation." Santos hurried to the medical bay to find working over a young whose crystal body showed severe stress fractures. The being's light was dim and flickering. "In his dying," Elder explained, "his harmonics filled with sorrow. The stress of the journey combined with separation from our energy sources, some of our people cannot survive the transition." Santos felt her heart sink. They had saved 50,000 people, but they were still losing lives every day. "What can we do?" "Nothing," replied simply. "This is the price of survival. Some will fall so that others may live." But Doctor was shaking her head. "There might be something. I've been studying physiology and I think, Elder, what if we could provide artificial energy input? Something to supplement what his body isn't getting from natural sources." "Our technology doesn't work that way," replied. "We require specific harmonic frequencies that only occur naturally near certain stellar formations." "What about music?" Doctor asked suddenly. "Human music, I've noticed that responds strongly to our songs." Santos thought back to the previous evening, when she had heard crew members singing old Earth ballads while hummed along in harmony. The aliens had seemed more energetic after those sessions. "It's worth trying," she said. What followed was unlike anything in medical history. Doctor worked with healers to identify the specific frequencies that could help stabilize their physiology. Human crew members took turns singing to dying refugees, their voices providing a form of energy therapy that no one had imagined possible. In's recovery was slow but steady. As word spread through the fleet, more humans volunteered to provide song therapy to ailing. In return, they shared their own harmonics, which seemed to have a calming effect on stressed human crew members. "This is remarkable," Doctor told Santos during one of their brief rest periods. "We're seeing unprecedented interspecies cooperation. Humans and are forming bonds that go beyond simple communication." But their biggest challenges were still ahead. 3 months into the journey, they received their first response from the Empire. "Attention, unknown convoy," came the harsh, mechanical voice over their communications system. "You are approaching restricted Imperial space. State your business or prepare to be destroyed." Santos moved to the communication station. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the human vessel Resilience. We are escorting refugees seeking sanctuary. We request permission to enter space to reach the uninhabited world designated in our previous diplomatic messages." The response came quickly. "Negative. Imperial space is closed to aliens and refugees. Turn back or face Imperial justice." Santos looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted from months of constant crisis management. The ships were barely holding together. They didn't have enough supplies to turn back, and there was nowhere else to go. "Send another message," she told. "Inform them that we are not turning back. Tell them we wish to negotiate." "Captain," said quietly, "they have a battle cruiser. We have converted cargo ships and a single explorer vessel." "I know the odds," Santos replied, "but we've come too far to give up now." Elder's voice came through the ship's intercom. "Captain Santos, my people have discussed this situation. We do not wish you to risk your lives further for us. If they will allow humans to pass through their space safely, you should leave us here." Santos activated ship-wide communications. "Elder, with respect, that's not happening. We came here to find you a home, not to abandon you in space." "But Captain," replied, "you have already saved us. Without your help, all 50,000 would have died on our. We can ask for no more." Santos felt anger rising in her chest. "Elder, you're not listening. We're not here because we owe you something or because it's our duty. We're here because you're our friends, and friends don't abandon friends." The simple declaration echoed through the ship and across the fleet communication channels. In the weeks that followed, Santos would learn that this moment became part of legend. The first time an alien species had called them friends without expecting anything in return. "Captain," Torres called out from her station, "I'm detecting 3 warships moving to intercept us." Santos looked at her exhausted crew, then at the display showing their convoy of refugee ships. They had come so far, overcome so many obstacles. They were not giving up now. "All ships maintain course and speed," she ordered. "If they want to stop us, they're going to have to explain to the galaxy why they destroyed a refugee convoy." As the ships approached, Santos wondered if she was leading her people and their new friends toward salvation or destruction. Either way, they would face it together. The bonds formed during their long journey had created something new, a partnership between species that went beyond simple cooperation. Whatever happened next, the humans would face it as one people, united by shared struggle and mutual respect. In the vast emptiness of space, their small convoy continued toward hope, carrying the dreams of 50,000 refugees and the determination of humans who refused to abandon those who had called for help. The 3 warships surrounded the refugee convoy like predators circling wounded prey. "Captain Santos, watched their tactical display as the massive vessels moved into attack formation, their weapons powered and ready to fire. "Alien convoy, you will stop immediately and prepare to be boarded," came the harsh voice of the commander. "You are trespassing in Imperial space and will face judgment under law." Santos activated her communications system. "Commander, this is Captain Santos. We are escorting refugees to an uninhabited world. We have no intention of establishing any presence in space beyond temporary settlement of homeless civilians." "Your intentions are irrelevant," the replied. "Imperial law prohibits unauthorized entry. You will surrender now or be destroyed." Elder's voice came through the fleet communication channel, speaking in harmonics that somehow conveyed both sorrow and determination. "Human friends, we release you from your obligations. You have done more than any people should ask of another. Save yourselves." Santos felt the eyes of her bridge crew on her. They were outnumbered and facing an empire known for its ruthless enforcement of territorial claims. The smart choice, the safe choice, would be to negotiate safe passage for the humans and leave to their fate. Instead, Santos activated ship-wide communications. "All ships, this is Captain Santos. Maintain formation and continue toward our destination. We're not backing down." Captain said quietly, "They're not bluffing. They will fire on us." "I'm counting on it," Santos replied, then opened a channel to the commander. "Commander, you are about to attack a refugee convoy in full view of galactic observers. Before you fire, I suggest you consider how that will look to the other major powers." "The Empire fears no judgment from inferior species," came the arrogant reply. "Maybe not," Santos admitted, "but you should fear the judgment of your own people. We've been broadcasting everything on open galactic channels. Your attack on unarmed refugees will be seen across known space. The Ani Empire, the Galactic Council, even the hegemony will witness brutality against civilians." There was a long pause before the commander responded. "You dare threaten us?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Santos said calmly. "I'm simply pointing out that destroying refugee ships might not be the best way to maintain your empire's reputation. Even military powers need trading partners." While Santos spoke, Doctor was working frantically at her station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive crystal formations on the planet below. The legends were accurate. This world could support millions of their people." Torres looked up from her engineering console. "Captain, the ships are holding position, but their weapons are still armed." Santos made a decision that would change the course of galactic politics. "Open a channel to all vessels." "This is Captain Maria Santos of the human ship Resilience. I'm transmitting full technical specifications for our navigation enhancement protocols, our crystal matrix energy systems, and our interspecies communication networks. These are technologies that the Inhumans developed together during our journey." Stared at her in shock. "Captain, those are classified technologies." Santos smiled grimly. "Not anymore. Commander, you now have access to navigation systems that could improve your fleet efficiency by 30%. The crystal matrix technology could revolutionize your energy production, and the communication protocols could allow real-time coordination across your entire empire." "Why would you give us this?" the commander asked, suspicion clear in his voice. "Because we're offering you a trade," Santos replied. "These technologies, plus exclusive human survey data from 12 unexplored systems, plus ongoing technical consultation, in exchange for settlement rights on one uninhabited world in your territory." Another long pause. Santos could imagine the discussion taking place on the command ship, as military officers weighed the value of the offered technologies against their territorial instincts. "The world you seek is worthless to the Empire," the commander finally said. "High radiation, unstable crystal formations, unsuitable for colonization." "Perfect for the," Santos replied. They thrive in high-radiation environments, and the crystal formations are exactly what they need. We're offering valuable technologies for a world you can't use anyway. Elder's harmonics filled the communication channel, this time carrying notes of amazement and hope. Captain Santos, the value of what you offer far exceeds the worth of our settlement. Why do you give so much for so little? Santos thought about her answer carefully. Because, Elder, sometimes the value of something isn't measured in credits or technology. Sometimes it's measured in lives saved and friendships forged. The commander's voice returned to the channel. Human Captain, the Empire accepts your proposal. The refugees may settle on the world designated, under the condition that they acknowledge sovereignty and provide technical assistance with crystal matrix installations throughout Imperial space. Santos looked at Elder's image on her. The ancient was practically glowing with joy, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics of gratitude and hope. Agreed, Santos said. There will be model citizens of the Empire. 3 days later, Santos stood on the surface of the world that they had renamed a new crystal home. The first settlements were already taking shape as crystal spires grew from the planet's surface, shaped by bioengineering into beautiful, functional cities. It's incredible, Doctor said, watching young play among formations that hummed with harmonic energy. They're not just surviving here, they're thriving. The planet was indeed perfect for the high radiation that would kill most species was exactly what they needed, and the crystal formations provided both shelter and energy sources. More importantly, the space around the planet's star contained the specific frequencies needed for long-range communication networks. Captain, Elder approached, his form now bright and strong in his people's ideal environment. We have received word from Or. The radiation finally forced evacuation of the last survivors. 3.5 million of our people died on our. Santos felt the weight of that number. For all their efforts, they had only saved a tiny fraction of the species. But, continued, his harmonics shifting to tones of hope and determination, the 50,000 here are young, strong, and grateful to be alive. We will rebuild. We will remember. And we will never forget the people who stayed when all others left. 2 years later, Santos received a priority message while conducting a survey mission near the galactic core. When she opened the transmission, she found herself looking at a familiar crystalline face, but Elder was not alone. Behind him, she could see the thriving cities of Anu, now home to nearly 100,000 as refugees from failed colonies joined the settlement. Captain Santos said, "We call to inform you of important developments. The Void Spawn have begun their assault on the Outer Rim territories. The Galactic Council has requested emergency navigation support for their defense fleets." Santos felt her blood chill. The Void Spawn were a nightmare from dark space machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems. If they were moving against populated areas, the galaxy faced its greatest threat in. The Council has offered significant compensation for navigation assistance, continued, but my people have declined their offer. Santos was shocked. Elder, why? The galaxy needs your help. Harmonics carried what could only be described as a smile. We told the Council that we would provide navigation support only if humans vouched for their intentions. We have learned that not all who ask for help truly value those who provide it. Captain Santos continued, we have told the Council that humanity speaks for thee in all galactic affairs. What humans think honorable, we will support. Who humans trust, we will trust. Santos felt a profound sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. They had essentially made humanity their voice in galactic politics, based entirely on the friendship forged during their refugee journey. There is more, said. Human children born on Anu learn both human speech and harmonics from birth. They are the first truly bilingual speakers of our musical language, and young ones study human history alongside our own, learning about a species that chose compassion over comfort. The transmission showed scenes from the schools on Anu, where human and children learned together, creating hybrid art forms that combined human creativity with harmonic beauty. "We have also completed the memorial you requested," said, and the image shifted to show a massive crystal formation at the heart of the main city. Carved into its surface in both human text and harmonic patterns were the names of every who died on there, and below that, a simple inscription. "We cried out for aid. The galaxy turned away. Only humans chose to stay with us. In gratitude eternal, we remember not just those we lost, but those who would not let us face loss alone." As the transmission ended, Santos realized that their rescue mission had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a true alliance based not on treaties or trade agreements, but on mutual respect and genuine friendship. When the Void Spawn War began 6 months later, the combined human fleets proved crucial to victory. But more importantly, their partnership became a model for cooperation that would reshape galactic civilization for centuries to come. Years passed, and Captain Santos, now Admiral Santos, stood before the same memorial on Anu, older and gray-haired but still strong. Around her, the fourth generation of human and children played together, speaking a hybrid language that incorporated both species' best qualities. Elder, now ancient even by standards, approached slowly. His crystal form had grown more translucent with age, but his inner light burned as bright as ever. "Admiral," he said, using harmonics that had become as familiar to Santos as her own heartbeat, "I am composing the final entry in our species' memory crystals. I wish to ensure I have the words correct." Santos smiled. "What have you written, old friend?" Harmonics filled the air with something that transcended music, becoming pure emotion translated to sound. When all others saw impossibility, humans saw only neighbors in need. When the powerful called us a lost cause, humans called us friends. This is why they will inherit the stars, not because they are the strongest but because they understand that true strength comes from standing with others when standing alone would be easier. Santos felt tears in her eyes as she listened to the harmonic poetry that would preserve their story for future generations. "That's perfect." The old's form brightened one last time. "No, Maria Santos. What is perfect is that when we called for help, someone answered. What is perfect is that some people, when faced with the choice between easy and right, will always choose right." As the twin suns set over Anu, casting rainbow colors through the crystal cities, Santos reflected on how a simple decision to help had changed not just the fate of 50,000 refugees, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Sometimes, she thought, the most important moments in history begin with someone simply deciding to care.